Here's the next key. It's not what you need to do behavior-wise that's going to make the biggest difference. It's who you need to become. This was the second day that changed my life. It was the day that I met my mentor, Mr. Jim Rohn, November day, 1994. Back of the room of a seminar just like this, he stood on stage leaning over a lectern and he said, how many people here want to have more? And I'm like some of you, I didn't raise my hand, right? But inside I was going, yeah, I want to have more. I want to have more money, have a bigger business, have a better body, what have you. And so I was ready to write down what he was going to tell me to do. Now, at that point, I'd had some success in my life, but I was doing it through brute force. I mean, just painstakingly out failing, out rejecting, just going for it and battered and bruised and bloodied. I couldn't do any more, but I was going to write it down and see what else I needed to do. Instead, he said, if you want to have more, you have to become more. And this was a twist of logic that I had not heard before. He said, success is not something you pursue. What you pursue eludes you. He says it could be kind of like chasing butterflies. He said, instead, success is something you attract by the person you become. Let me give you an example of this. So when I was late 20s, I was ready to be married. I was ready to find my mate. So it was a rainy 3-day weekend, and I sat down with an empty journal, kind of getting a theme of how I orchestrate my transformational moments, and I just wrote down everything I wanted in a woman. I mean, to great detail. What kind of family, what kind of culture, her tastes in food, where she wanted the vacation, down to the texture of her hair and the softness of her skin. 40 pages I wrote down. Right. And then I could hear Jim Rohn's voice in my head. What you pursue will elude you. Instead, it's who you need to become. So I took the rest of the weekend and wrote down the answers to a couple of questions. The woman that sits on these 40 pages, what kind of man does she want? And then, who do I need to become in order to be worthy and attractive to the woman on the previous 40 pages? And I wrote down everything that I needed to become. And it took another 40 pages. And as a result of this, and I'm telling you, some of this stuff works, I don't know, I can't explain it scientifically, just some of it just works like magic. So I did end up writing, who do I need to become in order to be worthy of the woman on the previous 40 pages? And if she were peeled off the pages of my journal to almost crazy, scary details, is my beautiful wife, Georgia. I mean, as if she had come out of nowhere. So I can't explain how this works, but I'm just saying it works. So when you think about the kind of people that you want to do business with, what kind of clients you want, write down what kind of clients do you want in your business? And then ask yourself the opposite question. What kind of vendor, supplier, expert, or business do these kinds of clients want to do business with? And are you living that standard? What kind of people do you want working for you? Employees and staff. Write down all the qualities. Positive, committed, disciplined, enthusiastic, passionate, loyal servant. And then ask yourself the opposite. What do these kind of people want to work for? And are you exemplifying each and every one of those attributes? There's the disconnect between what you want and who you are with the capability of actually achieving it. So homework assignment. Take each goal, write out who you need to become to accomplish them. Not what you need to do, incidentally, who you need to become. And success will be attracted to you. And then start small. You don't need to go out and make giant leaps. You don't need to leave here and set the world on fire. Start small. Let me give you an example. I did a turnaround for this educational software company out of Waco, Texas, Creative Education Institute. And I had a woman there that worked for me. Her name was Beverly. And I entered a room where she was having a conversation with some of her other colleagues, and she was talking about a friend who was going to run a half marathon. And she said, oh, I wish I could run a half marathon, but there's no way. And I walked in the room, I said, Beverly, you could totally run a half marathon. Why not? And she had had 2 children, been 3 or 4 years since she had her child, and she had gained a lot of extra weight that she had not been able to part with. She says, oh, I could never do that. I get winded going up a small flight of stairs. I said, well, I know that you can, but let me ask you, why would you want to run a half marathon? She said, oh, well, my 20-year high school reunion is next fall. I would love to look fabulous for that. And I'm like, great, there's the motivation. If I can show you a plan where you could run a half marathon and never experience pain, a painless plan to run a half marathon, would you take me up on the challenge? She's like, there's no way I can run a half marathon without experiencing any pain. I said, is it a deal? She said, it's a deal. So here's what I had her do. I said, just map a 1 mile loop around your house with your car. Just drive it. And then walk it 3 times over the next 2 weeks. She did it. I said, now I want you to walk it 3 times a week for 2 weeks. No problem. Everybody can walk, right? No big deal. And then I said, now we just want to do a slow jog until you become breathless. As soon as you become breathless, just stop and walk the rest of the way. She got up to 1/4 of a mile. She got up to a half, 3/4. It took her 3 weeks to get up to 3/4 of a mile. Okay? Long time. Now, it was almost 2 months before she could run a single mile. Now, a lot of you are thinking, dude, half marathon is like 13 some odd miles. 1 mile ain't going to cut it. So here's what I had her do. I said, just increase 1/8 of a mile each time you go out. That's only 300 steps further than the last time. That's it. And so doing 300 steps further than the last time that she was already comfortable with doing, in 6 months, she was running 9 miles. And in 9 months, she was running 13.5 miles. This is Beverly today. She lost 50 pounds. She's run 4 full marathons. She couldn't go up a half a flight of stairs before. Now, just starting small. So whether you think you could run a full marathon or a half marathon or run 9 miles, each and every one of you could if you just do it small and incrementally over time. Behavior now then becomes habits. And this is where the rubber meets the road. This is where success is ultimately germinated. It is in your habits. That's the third line of code in the operating system. Choices, a decision, acted on are behaviors, repeated consistently and disciplined over time are your habits. So what ends up happening is that these repeated behaviors end up burning a neurosignature in your brain. You know, your brain is gray matter. It's totally malleable. And you end up developing what are called brain grooves, the less technical term, which is the reason why you end up falling back into old habit patterns, because you actually have a brain groove that has developed a neurosignature for it. And so these habits, they start out like cobwebs, and then they become cables the more they're reinforced. So there's a story about an old Cherokee grandfather that has his grandson on his knee, and he's explaining that inside each of us there are 2 wolves. And he says to his grandson, one of the wolves is angry and bad and mean and lazy and vengeful and unforgiving. And then the other wolf is a good wolf, and it is disciplined and loving and forgiving and consistent. And the grandson looks up at his grandfather and says, well, which wolf is going to win? And the grandfather smiles and looked down and said, whichever you feed. And that is true about each and every one of you. Inside of you is a bad wolf and a good wolf. Lazy, undisciplined, inconsistent, and a good wolf that is passionate, energetic, consistent, and disciplined. And the one that's going to win this war, because they are always at war, is the one that you nourish the most. And every time you make a choice, you are nourishing one wolf or the other, and it is getting stronger and stronger based on how you nourish it. And here's the hard reality about habits. Good habits, they're hard to create, easy to lose. Meanwhile, bad habits are easy to create, hard to change. And when you try to uproot a bad habit, it could be like going through substance abuse withdrawal. It's difficult. It's painful. It can actually make you physically ill a lot of times, depending on how long you've been nurturing these bad habits. Because your habits is kind of like jumping into a river where the river is running in one direction. You could just jump in and not have to paddle at all and just be carried down the river. But if you try to change a bad habit, it could be like swimming upstream. With all your might and fortitude, you still might be standing still. It will be difficult. And here's the warning. It will take about 300 repetitions to weaken the neurosignature of your past habit and reburn in a new neurosignature of your good habit. So it will require a long-distance, consistent discipline. And willpower will not work. This is the reason why the diet industry has never been bigger in the history of humanity, but we've never been bigger in the history of humanity. We are more fat today than we have ever been, but there are more diet programs than there have ever been. What is the problem? They all rely on this, willpower, and willpower will not work. Here's what the FDA commissioner said. Focusing on not doing something eventually pushes us to do it more. Let's say you love chocolate cake. You love it. And let's say the only thing you can't have in your diet is chocolate cake. What are you thinking about all day long? Chocolate cake, which is the reason why when you're trying not to do something is the insatiable desire to do just that thing. So instead of willpower, let me give you an alternative. And it's what's called Y power. If I were to put a 300-foot steel beam across this stage here, and I said, I'll give anybody $20 if you just walk on top of this steel beam from one end to the other, how many people would take me up on my $20 offer? Yeah, it's easy $20, not a trick question. Now, what if I took this 300-foot steel beam and put it on top of two 100-story buildings? And I gave you $20 if you go from one end of the steel beam to the other. How many people would do it now? Now, what if on the other side of the building is your child, and the building is on fire, and the flames are licking at their neck, and if you don't go across that 300-foot steel beam, they will perish and die right before your eyes. How many people will go across that steel beam now? I did have one person in the audience say, which child? So I was like, that doesn't seem very friendly at all. Here's the interesting thing I want you to observe. The first time you said, no way, no how. Too dangerous, too much risk. I would never do that. The second time, your hand shot up, and I didn't even offer you $20. What's the difference? The reason why to do it is what changed. When your reason why is important enough, urgent enough, powerful enough, compelling enough, you will overcome almost anyhow, any danger, any risk to accomplish something. So the key lies in your discovery of what your urgent, important, and powerful why to achieve your goals are. I'll give you a more practical example. So Frank walks into the men's room, sees Bob at the toilet bowl, just finishing up, accidentally drops a $5 bill into the bowl. Frank's now interested to see what Bob's going to do. Bob pulls out his wallet, takes out a $50 bill, throws it in the bowl. Frank says, Bob, what are you doing? Bob looks back at Frank and says, oh, you didn't think I was going to go in there for just $5, did you? See, sometimes you got to make it worth it to do the dirty work necessary to accomplish your goals. You got to laugh a little harder than that, man. You're in the front row. You got to be supporting me here, all right? All right, so it is your reasons why. If anybody were to ask me any one skill that I would attribute any unusual success that I've had, is at that same seminar I met a mentor. He taught me a goal-achieving system that I've used for the past 20 years, which is the reason why I've been able to, in my opinion, to achieve what would seem like seemingly impossible goals. So it's how do you design it, and then an achievement system to help you stick with it along the way so that you get to the other end successful. And it was a couple of years ago, we published it into this book called Living Your Best Year Ever. But here's what it's like. If I were to offer you a briefcase of $1 million in cash, and I placed it on the back porch of some house here in Santa Clara, and I said, you can have it if you can find it. How long would it take for you to find that briefcase? You might wander your whole life and never find it. But what if I drew you a map to the back porch? How fast could you get there? Now, what if you're not familiar with the area, so I gave you a GPS system that guided you all along the way? How fast could you get there? That's the difference between having a goal achievement system and just having the idea that someday I want to be a millionaire. And it's on some back porch and you have no map to get there. The map is a goal achievement system that helps you get to the destination you're after. So, how do we uproot your bad habits and install the needed success habits? Inside the book, you can find five ways to uproot your bad habits and 7 ways to install the success habits. So I just want to refer to you that so we can keep marching forward. So let me let you leave with something so that you have how to build a success system. 3 ways. I call this my massive transformation formula. 3-step process.